Heart was palpitating the entire game, folks, and the Mets just fell short. After having three straight at-bats get down to the final strike, eventually with 2 outs, the Mets would lose this one for a second straight night, 4-2. Were swept by the New York Yankees, split the season series against them. I was in attendance for game 1 yesterday where they lost 4-2. That was frustrating. This one was even more frustrating. How's it going, everybody? Thank you guys all so much for chiming in for the latest post-game show here on WardyNYM. Would like everyone to know right now, this is not going to be a long live show. We'll just be going, I'd imagine, 20 or so minutes, maybe 25, because I got to go and then record my podcast with Anthony Recker and Joe Serralo. And we have a lot to say, a lot of emotion that we're going to be sharing on what was a really, really rough series loss here to the Yankees. A rough road trip for a Mets team that now desperately needs that off day tomorrow at the time of being live here. And then they have that huge 10-game homestand against the Rockies starting Thursday with Jacob deGrom on the bump. And this is a game that you could argue that no one deserves a Warriors top 5. People deserve to be in the Warriors top 5. They got some offense, but again, when a Mets team goes, 1 for 12, 1 for 13, 1 for 14, one of those numbers with runners in scoring position, this was a heartbreaker. This one hurt so much more than being in attendance in person in yesterday's loss. The Mets just looked flat yesterday. They looked gassed, a team that, again, hasn't had any off days on their road trips. They were not faring well, and, yes, they fared well in their first game in Philly. I was there, too, so I shouldn't say that. But the Mets, they've had tendencies, especially with trips, when they don't have any off day, when they're going from one city to another, they tend to come out flat. That was the case yesterday. And then today, talk about wasted opportunities. That was the exact definition of this entire game. I'm honestly disgusted. I'm beyond frustrated for this Mets team. And now they are only 2 games ahead of the Atlanta Braves, that in which if the Braves don't play the Mets, even though that they fared well in the last series against them, other than playing against the Mets, in which the Braves are below 500 against, the Braves have dominated every single team they played this year. They, of course, are in Pittsburgh. They have a light schedule down the stretch. They face more competitive teams down the stretch than the Mets that should hopefully, again, knock on wood, benefit the Mets here. But, it's do or die, it feels like, for this Mets team now over this 10-game homestand to make a statement. They have a huge series in my birthday week, which is going to be August 30th against the Dodgers. We'll see how they do there. But this was this one was like the heart was just ripped right out of my chest. To say it was a disappointing game for the Mets and their biggest hitters in the lineup, not named Jeff McNeil and Starling Marte, is an understatement. Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor did not step up to the plate. Daniel Vogelbach had one of his worst games as a Met, in my opinion. I'm not going to harp on him too much. Again, Vogie's the reason why the Mets at least had a couple runs yesterday. But just some really frustrating at-bats today. They got to Frankie Montas early. Montas was in jams on those first 2 innings. Mets could not score. Taijuan Walker was cruising early in his first start back from his bulging disc and back spasm injury. And then he, of course, got into some issues there. But, guys, let's deep dive this entire game. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe on, as always. Help us get to, of course, 100 likes for our first short-term goal, and help us get to 18K subs for the next short-term goal on the channel, as I, Wardy, will be breaking down, sharing my raw reactions to this really, really gut punch and brutal 4-2 loss for his second consecutive night in the Bronx. Would first like to make note, it was my first time in Yankee Stadium yesterday. Not a fan. All bias aside, not a fan. I said it on Twitter, I'll say here. It's like combining an airport and a mall together. Squish. The food was absolutely shit. You would think that they would have more cultural diversity with the way that New York does to represent things food-wise. But no, it's really night and day. If you like more old school, more white collar, then Yankee Stadium's place for you. But no, I'm taking Citi Field every day of the week. And that's the only thing that I could really take from over the Yanks here, because the Yanks were the better team in this series, flat out. A Yankees team that had lost 6 consecutive series entering this matchup against the Mets. And the Mets just simply didn't have it. They did not have nearly enough going. Aaron Judge performed exactly what you would do for a guy that's expected to win MVP this year, or at least get awfully close. He dominated the Mets in this series, got the big hits one needed, and the Mets just simply had nothing that they could compete with. They got some things that went their way that we'll get into here in the show shortly. But overall, this was a pretty frustrating, pretty pathetic, pretty anemic Mets offense. Again, where I look at the Mets pitching, yes, it was frustrating in moments, but at the end of the day, when the Mets don't muster more than 2 runs apiece in each of these games, how much blame can I put on the pitching? Let's be frank here. The offense needs to step up. They balled out against the Phillies, a lesser opponent pitching-wise. They go into the Bronx against a Yanks team that they swept at Citi Field, and the Bronx, a team that was not faring well whatsoever. Really, this entire post All-Star break, and they get the job done against the team in Queens. I mean, so frustrating to say that the Mets really were a team for all of us fans that were beyond looking like this team is not just gas, but they just don't have it. Pete Alonso did not look locked in. He got a couple base knocks tonight, which was nice, but Pete could not, for his life, come up with a big hit. He had a brutal road trip. He only had one true good game in that first game against the Phillies, in which I was in attendance, when he had his 30th bomb of the year, surpassed 100 RBIs. He had that big 2 RBI hit in the Braves series, but other than that, I mean, Alonso just did not step up to the plate, has not looked locked in over a 10-game stretch we're talking about between the Braves, the Phillies, and now the Yanks. Francisco Lindor was one of the few bright spots offensively at times for the Mets. Yes, he didn't show up as much in this series, but Lindor has been great for the Mets, really, for the majority of the season, if not the entire thing. So I'm not going to harp on him too much here. Sucks that he couldn't get a base knock for the Mets in that at-bat. I mean, that first call was a clear ball on the slider on him, but again, Mets got some calls that just went their way. They're in the top of the ninth, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. It went both ways. It just unfortunately hurt the Mets at the wrong time there. But guys, let's deep dive this game. This was, again, a very frustrating one. Am I concerned about the Mets? No, I'm not concerned about the Mets. However, I'm not happy with them right now. I'm not satisfied. When you go 4-6 over what was, don't get me wrong, a brutal stretch. I mean, just the fact that you lose those first 2 games in Atlanta, right? And it's not because of the lack of pitching, but it's because of the lack of offense. The Mets only mustered like 1 run in the first 2 games against the Atlanta Braves. It doesn't matter that Cookie Carrasco and Taijuan Walker fell to injury. The Mets need to be better. So they already put themselves in a hole early on this road trip offensively. They just never got in a full groove. Yes, the Phillies series definitely helped, with the Phillies doing everything and anything possible to throw out piss-poor defense to benefit the Mets and for them to get some clutch hits when needed. But this series in particular, I mean, God forbid runners in scoring position. Again, when the Mets go 1 for 12, 1 for 13, you're not loving their chances of winning the ball game. And you look at the Braves, they're going to continue to roll against every single team that they play. They may even roll against teams that, again, are around 500 or above 500. They have some bigger matchups down the stretch, a lot more than the Mets do right now. The Mets currently have, I believe, 9 games left against teams above 500, whereas the Braves, I'm pretty sure, have around 18 or 17. So it's favorable schedule-wise for the Mets, but not by much. And if the Mets don't take advantage of that 4-game set against the Rockies, other huge matchups of lesser opponents in September, then we may very well find ourselves second in this division if they do not get themselves rolling and stay consistent against opponents that they absolutely need to. Yes, we would have loved to see them step up more in this road trip, but it's over. It's done with. Now we have to look on forward on what they are facing next. But guys, let's talk about this game. Enough of me ranting and just sharing my raw thoughts, even though I always do that. Let's get into it, guys. Marte in the first would have blooped single, right? Lindor would have walked. You think, okay, the Mets have 2 on, no out here, less than 2 outs, I should say. Nimmo grounded out his first at-bat against Frankie Montas, a guy who has had a 9-year ERA and 3 starts for the Yanks, 14 earned runs in 14 innings. The Yanks, when they acquired him, I don't know if they realized or not, Montas had roughly a 6.5-year ERA outside of Oakland this entire season, has been susceptible to the fly balls, and they fly out far and easy, especially to right with the biggest short porch in all of baseball there for the Yankees. So if the Mets could just lift the ball against Montas, you like their chances. However, they let Montas get through a couple innings when they absolutely should execute, and that was an X factor in this game. They let Montas get in a group, beat up on him a little bit there in the end with some fluky things happening, but they did not do nearly enough against a Frankie Montas, who, by all means, was not pitching his sharpest game. Still looks like a guy that was susceptible to getting tattooed. The Mets just couldn't do it. You see Alonso with a fly out. Again, brutal. LeBron's in scoring position for this entire road trip for the most part. Daniel Vogelbach with a strikeout. Again, Vogie's worst game as a Met, or one of them, in my opinion. Not going to harp on too much for Vogie. He's been really good for the Mets for the entirety of the time he's been acquired here. The only reason why the Mets got runs yesterday, but you need to be better. Dealt with a little bit of a tight hamstring still, so later in the game, when it was a double play, didn't even hustle down the line. The Mets didn't stand a chance. However, guys, Taijuan Walker, first start back from his injury, as I mentioned, was absolutely shoving early in this one against the Yankees team. 6 pitch first, including 3 flyouts. Okay, great start for Taijuan Walker. We get to the second again. Mets have more opportunities here. Jeff McNeil with a really strong game. That's why he's my number 1 star. McHits, and you're not going to see him go more than 1 game with, less than 2 hits. He didn't even have a hit yesterday, right? For the hottest hitter in baseball the past month plus. He's been phenomenal. McNeil with a single. Cano with a hit by pitch. Mets have 2 on, less than 2 out. Beatty reaches on a fielder's choice. Beatty had a good game today, got on base 3 times. Nito double play ends the inning. However, Nito, who in that situation could have been warranted to maybe go for the sack bunt. No, instead, even though that he did it twice tonight and they were effective, should have did that from the jump. That was a call that I wish Buck made and wish he didn't wait until his second and then third or fourth at bat. That ends it. Mets ground into a rough double play there. Nito, I mean, just looking as slow as a slug down first, not known for his speed. I feel like Vogelback's even faster than him, maybe without the hamstring injury, but that's besides the point. We get then to the bottom of the second. Brandon Nimmo makes a nice diving catch in center to end the inning. Nimmo's defense has been stellar all year except for that play there against the Atlanta Braves. If you know, you know. We get to the fourth inning. This is where Taijuan Walker starts to get tattooed a little bit. Aaron Judge, who had 3 home runs and 10 at-bats against Taijuan entering tonight's game. He would get his 4th bomb, no doubt. Going to left field, 453 feet, absolutely murder that baseball. His 46th or 47th home run of the year, I'm losing track at this point. And that was the 4th bomb that Ty gave up against Judge in his career. Anthony Rizzo with a base knock. Torres with a single, Josh Donaldson with a walk. It was a strike, but they called it a walk. Again, there were some calls that could have went either way tonight that either benefited the Mets or didn't go the Mets' way. And then Cabrera with an RBI walk, the rookie Oswaldo Cabrera, because Taijuan could not command the strike zone. However, he would get out of that, only surrendering 2 runs. We get to the top of the 5th, folks. Mark Canha with a double. First extra base hit for the Mets tonight. Canha continues to be an extra base god for the Mets, which is awesome to see. Has more pop in his bat. We saw it with the heroics in the final game against the Phillies. We saw it against the Braves as well. He's been a doubles and a home run machine lately. Love that for Mark Canha, who's usually not known for playing some of the best baseball of his career right now in his first year with the Amazons. Beatty reaches on a catcher's interference from Higashioka. 2 on, less than 2 out. Nito with a perfectly placed sack bunt. That would be the MLB leading 11th sack bunt this year is Tomas Nito. Wouldn't be his last of the game. Marte with an Oppo RBI single. Beatty out at home. Unfortunately, again, that was a bad... I did not like that by Cora. Again, it wasn't as bad as trying to get Marte home in the extra innings lost 2-1. Of course, I was there for that game against the Phillies at Citi Field in game 1 of that series over a week ago. But this was another. Cabrera was playing shallow there and right. Got to Higashioka in time, bobbled it, but was able to handle it fine. Gets Beatty out. The Mets only score a run, so they're only down by 1 there. That we see in the 5th inning, folks. Then we get to the 6th. Pete Alonso gets a base knock. Jeff McNeil with an RBI double after Pete Alonso stumbles after a base. You guys have seen the highlights. Was so bizarre, was so Mets-esque for that to go their way for a change, right? Unfortunately, it would turn on their head later in this game with Alonso being at the heart of it. Alonso was rounding third, as we saw, after McNeil hit that gapper to right center, and then he stumbled rounding third. It was because of the bag. Goes back, but then sees that McNeil is past second, and instead of Torres realizing I should throw to home, Alonso then tags, goes to home, and McNeil dives back to second and gets there safely. Mets tied the ball game in one of the flukiest fashions you'll ever see, folks, but they do, in fact, tie the ball game. We get to the 7th. Brett Beatty, who was already on base twice tonight, gets himself a nice place setter to begin the inning there in the 7th with an opposite field base knock. Ends his 0 for 15 skid. That's great for the youngster. Nito with a sack bunt, his second of the game, now leading the league with 12, as a matter of fact. Mets do not score that inning, however. We get to the 7th inning. Joely Rodriguez comes in for Seth Lugo after Lugo pitched a scoreless inning and relief after Taijuan went 5 solid innings. Joely comes in. Cabrera with a single. IKF, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa with a sack bunt. Alonso misses a pop-up to right on the first baseline. So frustrating that he couldn't handle it there. It was beyond unfortunate. One of those things that usually goes the Mets' way was now reverse rolls. It gets them on. And then, of course, you see Cabrera steal third base with ease. And unfortunately, that is where Andrew Benintendi, who murdered the Mets in game 1 of this series, goes lefty on lefty against Joely Rodriguez and gets himself an opposite field RBI single to make it a 3-2 ball game. Gives the Yanks the lead. And then Aaron Judge, of course, Aaron Judge does what he does best. He pulls himself an RBI single once Ottavino comes into the ball game. Adam was not able to get out of that inning unscathed for the Mets after Joely gave up a run. And just like yesterday, Mets are down 4-2 late in the game, not loving their chances here. We get to the 8th inning. Francisco Lindor with a walk. Pete Alonso with a single, but Daniel Vogelback with a brutal double play. Could not trot down to first well, did not have the speed because of his hamstring. And then McNeil with a fly out. Jeff was great today, not harping much on him, but there was not much offense outside him, however. We get to the 9th, as we mentioned already in this one, folks. Tyler Naquin with the walk. Again, pinch hitting there for Tomas Nido. Naquin was on an 0-2 count. Gets on base for the Mets there, and that was already with 2 outs. Brandon Nimmo, infield single after, of course, being on an 0-2 count with 2 outs. Marte, 0-2 count to start out, 2 outs, and grinds it out for a walk. Clark Schmidt is pulled out of the game, grinded out a strong 3 scoreless innings for the Yankees. They bring in Wandy Peralta against Francisco Lindor. Lindor on the right side of the plate for the first time tonight. Lindor 2 for 3 in his career with a solo bomb against Wandy. However, quickly 0-2 on the count on him after getting a slider. First pitch to him was a clear ball, but again, the ump was giving stuff to both sides. I'm not going to use that as an excuse here 100%. And then Lindor eventually flew out to center, and that'll do it for the ball game, folks. The Mets are a team that entered tonight's game that while being down by a deficit after losing a game last night, have the best record in baseball at 34-10, but that drops to 34-11, and they dropped tonight's game for a second consecutive night, 4-2 to the Yankees, and I'm beyond frustrated. I think the only reason why I'm not, screaming more or doing anything or ranting anymore is because of the fact that, again, I expect this Mets team to get on a roll. I knew how brutal of a road trip this was for them. Thank God that they have a Rockies for a 4-game set with Old Timers Day on Saturday. That'll be a lot of fun before they match up against the Dodgers. I would have not been nearly as comfortable about the matching up against the Dodgers if they didn't at least have one an off day and then a 4-game set against a lesser opponent and try to get back in the swing of things for a team that has played below 500 ball over their past 10 games. But my raw reactions to this game, guys, again, this was a team that had endless opportunities in the first couple innings, and this is a Mets team that has unfortunately proven that while they scored the first 3 innings often, when they do not score in the first 3 innings, which was the case in both these games, their chances of winning a ball game is far slimmer. It's simple as that. Yes, they've had their heroic comebacks this year. We saw it against the Phillies, among others, but for the most part, this is a team that, again, if they do not get those early runs and take advantage of the opportunities given them that they've done so great for the vast majority of the season, they just look like a team that is not in the same groove. Montas got in a groove after a shaky first couple innings and then got beat up and only went 5.2, 6 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. And then Taijuan Walker basically matched him in performance, maybe a little less because he couldn't go past 5 innings, but that was just Buck being careful with him coming off of the back spasms and the bulging disc. I understood that. 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. A lot of that home run to Judge on 81 pitches. Jeff McNeil's my number 1 star, 1,000% everybody. 2 for 4 with the walk, the RBI, and the run scored. Marte, 2 for 4 with an RBI, and of course, have that walk in the 9th. Pete Alonso, I don't know why I wrote out his name full there, but I guess I did. 2 for 4 with a run score, but Pete, again, was very underwhelming in this series and very underwhelming for the vast majority of the road trip. He was so swing miss, was not locked in nearly enough. And again, have that one big game for the most part against the Phillies and have that big base knock to drive in 2 runs against the Braves and the 1 win the Mets had against the Braves, or was that the game that they lost 3-2? Whichever one it was. Regardless, Alonso did not step up to the plate nearly enough in this series, and so was the case with some of these Mets hitters that just were very sporadic in their offensive production. Very disappointing road trip for them. They need to bounce back. I expect them to, but it's not fun now when, again, not long ago, less than 2 weeks ago, right? You had a 7-game lead on the Atlanta Braves, and just like that, you're already down to 2. The Braves don't stop winning. It's a symbol. We've learned that all year long. The Braves are playing teams, especially below 500, which has been the case because the Braves have had one of the easier schedules in all baseball this year in the first half and the second half. It's not like the Mets were the Mets in the first half had the hard schedule in baseball. Now in the second half, one of the easier ones, especially in the month of September. Mets have been up and down with their scheduling, unlike the Braves. So again, I'm not here to make excuses. The Braves are a phenomenal team. They take full advantage of all opportunities given them against lesser opponents. The Mets early on in the season didn't do that as much as you'd like. Weren't getting as much series sweeps, and that is something that can come back to bite the Mets in the end if they don't take advantage against the Rockies. And then, of course, everything that they have in store, which what on paper should be their easiest schedule in baseball in the month of September, guys. You see there, Taijuan Walker is my number 4 star. Solid start for him back from his injury. Not harping on him at all. Mark Canha, my number 5 star with the double, 1 for 3, and the run scored. But yeah, you see also Nate Fisher, who pitched 3 scoreless for the Mets, a guy who was working in a bank a year ago, was DFA'd yesterday to make room for Tomas Nido on the roster. I really hope that Fisher stays in the organization. I think there's a solid chance he may, but that's to be determined. I saw Sam Clay, the left-hander that was DFA'd by the Mets, did clear, and he's sent back down to Syracuse. Right-hand pitcher, Mr. McGill, is going to be facing live batters on Friday. The Mets are getting bullpen back within the next couple weeks, which is awesome to see. And on top of it all, Eduardo Escobar will be back with the team this weekend, probably platooning things with Brett Beatty while also being a backup shortstop for Francisco Lindor. Not that you expect Lindor to get pulled much, but I mean, as stubborn as Lindor can be, it would not hurt for him to potentially have an off day at least one of the games against the Rockies. I know that he wants to play every day, but for the sake of him and making sure that he's fresh down the stretch, I don't think it would have hurt by having him out for at minimum one game, even with an off day tomorrow. But that's just my opinion. Even Pete Alonso, I think against the Rockies, you could justify potentially giving Pete a day off and having Darren Ruff at first base and then having Vogie, of course, there at DH, especially in one of the games. I'm sure the Mets will be matching up against the Southpaw and one, if not two games in the Rockies matchup. So a lot of takeaways from this one, more than anything, not happy from what we saw from the Mets tonight. The Yankees were certainly the better team in these both games. They took advantage more than the Mets did, and the Mets just simply looked flat. Can't say the Mets would be different if they didn't have this crazy road trip entering the series. All I know is that the Mets should have been better than what they were. They simply weren't. So let me address a couple donations, guys, and then we're going to get out of here because I do have a podcast to record. Again, this was just a tough loss. Definitely a tough loss. And the podcast will be out early tomorrow, guys. I know that not a lot of people are going to be excited to listen to it. Just bear with us. Me, Joe, and Anthony are going to have a lot of raw takes more on this series. And, of course, we're going to be deep diving the Rockies series, the Old Timers Day. Exciting stuff that's going to be coming at Citi Field. But right now, it is bleak if you were a Mets fan. And it's crazy to say that when we're literally in first in the division. But, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that you go from 7 games to 2 in a fairly short period of time, because you're just not winning enough ball games. This is a team that's been well above 500 all year. They cannot sacrifice playing stretches of 10-plus games below 500 or borderline 500, because the Braves will come and they will pass the Mets if they continue this pace. I don't expect them to, but in that worst-case scenario, the Braves surely would pass them. So hopefully for the Mets' sake, they can continue to grind things out the way that they have plenty this year. We're not far at all, again, from making this either a tied ball game or gaining the lead there in the 9th, but just fell short, which was the case in, again, many games in this road trip, especially when looking at the Braves. They just did not have enough clutch hitting when needed. Orphanage Biller DeGrom, thank you for the dono. Sorry, Rory, we went 2-0 by play. The I'm calling 5 strikes that were balls. Beatty not tagging to third. Exhaustion 2. We move into September. GG's. Thank you so much for the dono. And here's the thing. I wanted Jake to pitch against the Yanks just as much as the next guy. But here's the thing. Taijuan Walker's not the reason why the Mets lost this game. The Mets lost this game because you couldn't muster more than a run when you had, again, 12, 13, 14 guys with runners in scoring position. The offense is the reason why you lost this game, and the offense is the reason why you lost this series, flat out and simple. Jake getting extra days is good for him. I was against that first, but in hindsight, is 2020 now, because I look at Jake and he's someone that, again, Buck, the idea is that they want to keep him and Max fresh. Max is getting an extra day off. That's why he's pitching on Sunday against the Rockies. He won't be matching up against the Dodgers, which sucks. I hope that Jake, based on alignment, should be pitching against the Dodgers, which would be good because he's pitching the first game of a 4-game set here against the Rockies. So I'd imagine he might pitch in game 1 against the Dodgers, but we'll see about that. But again, the Mets want to make sure that these guys are fresh. They're their aces. They cannot sacrifice an injury to either of these guys down the stretch. The Mets will go as far as Max and Jake takes them this year, and of course having consistent offense. So not harping too much. Looking back now, originally I was a little bit more on Jake pitching against the Rockies and not the Yanks. I know that we would have loved to see Jake tonight. I know I would have. But again, it's not like Ty was the sole reason why the Mets lost tonight. It was the farthest thing from the truth. The offense simply could not step up to the plate when they need to most, and that is exactly why they got swept in these 2-game sets. And I also apologize, guys, that I can't take callers or I can't really acknowledge much comments tonight. Like I said, I got to get out of here, but I do appreciate everyone smashing that like and subscribe button. Thank you guys all so much for that. Continue hitting those buttons. Help us get 18K subs, I should say, and stay tuned. Bleav in Queens, which is available on all podcast platforms, here on YouTube, on the WardyNYM YouTube channel, everywhere you get your podcast. New episode 17 will be coming out tomorrow, 6 a.m. audio and 12 p.m. for the premiere here on the YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm out of here. Rough one, not happy. Now I'm going to share more of that unhappy emotion and some more raw emotion in the podcast. But until then, have a great rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you guys are watching this, folks. This is WardyNYM, and I'm signing out. Have a good one. And no matter what, let's go Mets.